Streams of Silver, The Legend of Drizzt, Book 5, by R.A. Salvatore. We've dug our holes in hallowed caves, put goblin foes in shallow graves. This day our work has just begun, in the mines where silver rivers run. Beneath the stone the metal gleams, torches shine on silver streams. Beyond the eyes of the spying sun, in the mines where silver rivers run. The hammers chime on mithril pure, as dwarven mines in days of yore. A craftsman's work is never done, in the mines where silver rivers run. To dwarven gods we sing our praise, put another orc in a shallow grave. We know our work has just begun, in the land where silver rivers run. Prelude. On a dark throne in a dark palace perched a dragon of shadow. Not a very large worm, but foulest of the foul. Its mere presence, blackness, its talons, swords worn from 1,000 kills. Its maw ever warm with the blood of victims, its black breath, despair. A raven's coat was its tested scales, so rich in their blackness that they shimmered in colours, a scintillating facade of beauty for a soulless monster. Its minions named it Shimmergloom and paid it all honor. Gathering its strength over the course of centuries, as dragons do, Shimmergloom kept its wings folded back and moved not at all, except to swallow a sacrifice or to punish an insolent underling. It had done its part to secure the place, routing the bulk of the dwarven army that stood to face its allies. How well the dragon had eaten that day! The hides of dwarves were tough and muscled, but a razor-toothed maw was well suited to such meat. And now the dragon's many slaves did all the work, bringing it food and heeding to its every desire. The day would come when they would need the power of the dragon again, and Shimmergloom would be ready. The huge mound of plundered treasures beneath it fueled the dragon's strength, and in this respect Shimmergloom was surpassed by none of its kind, possessing a hoard beyond the imagination of the richest kings, and a host of loyal minions, willing slaves to the dragon of darkness. The chill wind that gave Icewind Dale its name whistled across their ears, its incessant groan eliminating the casual conversation the four friends usually enjoyed. They moved west, across the barren tundra, and the wind, as always, came from the east, behind them, quickening their already strong pace. Their posture and determined drive of their strides reflected the eagerness of a newly begun quest, but the set of each adventurer's face revealed a different perspective of the journey. The dwarf, Bruno Battlehammer, leaned forward from his waist, his stocky legs pumping mightily beneath him, and his pointed nose, poking out above the shag of his wagging red beard, led the way. He seemed set in stone apart from his legs and beard, and his many-notched axe held firmly before him in his gnarled hands, his shield emblazoned with the standard of the foaming mug strapped tightly on the back of his overstuffed pack, and his head adorned in his many-dented horned helm, never turning to either side. Neither did his eyes deviate from the path, and rarely did they blink. Bruno had initiated this journey to find the ancient homeland of Clan Battlehammer, and though he fully realized that the silvery halls of his childhood were hundreds of miles away, he stomped along with the fervour of one whose long-awaited goal is clearly in sight. Beside Bruno, the huge barbarian, too, was anxious. Wolfgar loped along smoothly, the great strides of his long legs easily matching the dwarf's rolling pace. There was a sense of urgency about him, like a spirited horse on a short rein. Fires hungry for adventure burned in his pale eyes as clearly as in Bruno's, but, unlike the dwarf, Wolfgar's gaze was not fixed upon the straight road before them. He was a young man, out to view the wide world for the first time, and he continually looked about, soaking up every sight and sensation that the landscape had to offer. He had come along to aid his friends on their adventure, But he had come, as well, to expand the horizons of his own world. The entirety of his young life had been spent within the isolating natural boundaries of Icewind Dale, limiting his experiences to the ancient ways of his fellow barbarian tribesmen and the frontier people of 10 towns. There was more out there, Wulfgar knew, and he was determined to grasp as much of it as he possibly could. Less interested was Drizzt the cloaked figure trotting easily beside Wulfgar. His floating gait showed him to be of elf heritage, but the shadows of his low-pooled cowl suggested something else. Drizzt was a drow, a black elf, denizen of the lightless world. He had spent several years on the surface, denying his heritage, yet he had found that he could not escape the aversion to the sun inherent on his people, and so he sunk low within the shadow of his cowl, his stride nonchalant, even resigned, this trip being a merely continuation of his existence, another adventure in a lifelong string of adventures. Forsaking his people in the dark city of Menzel Branson, Drizzt had willingly embarked upon the road of the nomad. He knew that he would never be truly accepted anywhere on the surface. Perceptions of his people were too vile, and rightly so, for even the most tolerant of communities to take him in. The road was his home now, and it was always travelling to avoid an inevitable heartache of being forced from a place that he might have come to love. 10 towns had been a temporary sanctuary. The forlorn wilderness settlement housed a large proportion of rogues and outcasts, and though Drizzt wasn't openly welcomed, his hard-earned reputation as a guardian of the 10 towns' borders had granted him a small measure of respect and tolerance from many of the settlers. Bruno named him a true friend, though, and Drizzt had willingly set out beside the dwarf on the trek, despite his apprehension that once he moved out beyond the influence of his reputation, the treatment he received would be less than civil. Every so often, Drizzt dropped back the dozen yards or so to check on the 4th member of the party. Huffing and puffing, Regus the halfling brought up the rear of the troop, and not by choice, with a belly too round for the road and legs too short to match the pumpkin strides of the dwarf. Paying now for the months of luxury he had enjoyed in the palatial house in Brinchander, Regus cursed the turn of luck that he had forced him to the road. His greatest love was comfort, and he worked at perfecting the arts of eating and sleeping as diligently as a young lad with dreams of heroic deeds swung his first sword. His friends were truly surprised when he joined them on the road, but they were happy to have him along, and even Bruno, so desperate to see his ancient homeland again, took care not to set the pace too far beyond Regus's ability to keep up. Certainly, Regis pulled himself to his physical limits, and without his customary complaining. Unlike his companions, though, whose eyes looked to the road up ahead, he kept glancing back over his shoulder, back toward 10 towns and the home he had so mysteriously abandoned to join in the journey. Drizzt noted this with some concern. Regis was running away from something. The companions kept their westerly course for several days. To their south, the snow-capped peaks of the jagged mountains, the spine of the world, paralleled their journey. This range marked the southern boundary to Icewind Dale, and the companions kept an eye out for its end. When the westernmost peaks died away to flat ground, they would turn south, down the pass between the mountains and the sea, running out of the dale altogether and down the last 100-mile stretch to the coastal city of Luskan. Out on the trail each morning, before the sun rose at their backs, they continued running until the last pink lines of sunset, stopping to make camp at the very last opportunity before the chill wind took on its icy nighttime demeanor. Then they were back on the trail again before dawn, each running within the solitude of his own perspectives and views. A silent journey, save the endless murmur of the eastern wind.